Hello, everyone. My name is Yana Allen, and I'm the Director of Civic Engagement and Special Projects at NCAI. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our first ever paint night. Paint and snack night, actually. Snacks are important, so we need to make sure that that gets in there. But welcome this evening. This is one of several of our game night series where we highlight and elevate work across Indian country in the realms of civic engagement. And that includes the 2020 census outreach efforts, as well as our Native Vote initiative. So this evening, the event is going to be in two parts. First, we'll hear from our featured Indian country artist, Greg Deal, about the advocacy work that he does along with his artwork. So Greg is going to instruct us on how we can use things that we have on hand around the house to be able to create art that can make an impact and really create a statement and bring awareness about our civic engagement issues. And so we would like to elevate civic engagement through census, Native Vote, and tonight, let's get started with Greg Deal. So Greg is Pyramid Lake Paiute and is a contemporary artist who challenges Western perception of Indigenous peoples, touching on issues of race, history, and stereotype. And through his work and paintings, murals, performances, art, and filmmaking, and spoken word, Greg Deal critically examines issues and tells stories of decolonization and appropriation that affect Indian country. And so Greg Deal's activism exists in his art as well as in his participation in political movements. And so this evening, we'd really like to welcome Greg Deal. Hi, Greg.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm having snacks.
Joining us. Good. I'm excited. I actually just want to point out too that I have some snacks here as well. I have pancakes made from wild rice pancake mix from Red Lake Nation. So shout out to them for this great Indigenous made product. So
awesome. Well, I am a vegan, so I'm a vegan, so my snacks vary sometimes. But my favorite is hummus and pretzels. And we have a gluten-free household here too. So we have to deal with celiac. So there's a lot of gluten issues. And then there's a fair amount of us in my household with no meat. So my name is Greg Deal. I am a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. I am an artist and a father and I could say an activist, I guess, but you know what one person calls an activist, another might call an adult with an opinion. But my household is large. I have 5 kids. My wife and I have been married for over 21 years now, and making art is what I do. I wanted to share a couple of things with you guys, and so that you could get a little bit of context about me and where I come from and how I kind of do what I do. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where my father's from. My mother met him while she was traveling through. And later we moved to Utah, and I ended up growing up in Park City, Utah, which sounds very bougie. And I promise you is not. It was kind of tough growing up because really my sister and I were the only brown kids in the school that we grew up in. My mom's generation, I think, was more on the end of, you're either very proud or you're not. Coming out of the civil rights movement, there's folks that were involved in that are very proud, and then there's people that are just trying to survive in the communities that they live in. But for my generation, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was very much, it very much became something different. Public Enemy really spoke to me because Public Enemy was the only thing that I saw on television that was brown people talking about social and political issues. And then, of course, there's other bands and things that come along that sort of helped that along the way. The first book I read cover to cover was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And for me, that was a catalyst for moving into a place of being socially aware. And of course, this is in a time when there really wasn't any internet. And so there was very little access to this if you didn't know where to look, or if you weren't at the very least very assertive in the way that you looked. And so this became very much a part of my work. I was very much into hip hop, very much into punk rock, And this all plays a role in those things. And I'll be able to share a little bit with you on that today. I set up a PowerPoint. We've got Matt on the background to kind of get that going. And just so in case you're interested in who I am and what you'd like to, if you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm very accessible. I always try to answer questions if they come up. And at the very least, my Instagram has some good content, I hope. We'll go to the next slide. Most of the works, the next one, Matt, most of the works that I'm going to show you are visual works, and these visual works vary in sort of subject matter and what they look like. I have begun to move away from using these old images of the old ones and being very careful about what I create, but occasionally I will find something that really steps out. I found this image, and he is wearing a cross. I'm pretty sure that in the original image, the cross was not gold, but I wanted to create this piece, and it is called Divine, because I wanted to touch on this idea of Indigenous people actually being able to be divine. Our ideas not divine? Is our existence not based in divinity? Do we not believe in a creator? In the Western context of our existence, we've been told that we are not, that we are savages, and that we are a problem that needs to be fixed. And so these types of things, although possibly a little bit based on some of the boarding school aspects of like the perception of us, I maintain that we are divine, that we are important, and that we are creative in the things that we're able to do and the things that we do. Let's go to the next slide. This is a good example of what we're going to kind of be doing today. This is paper and paint and ink, and they're all sort of existing in the same space. This piece is called Stepping Out of the Darkness. And that is a paper printout, the photograph that's in there. And I'm able to use that in sort of a collage way, which is a really easy and accessible thing that we can do and that we're going to talk about today. Let's go to the next slide. Integrating Indigenous voice, integrating, the sort of stereotype of our existence with just our existence is also a big part of the subject matter that I work in. These things are low-hanging fruit, I mean, because they're so accessible to us as Indigenous people. But the truth is that most people outside of our preview don't understand these things. They don't understand the context of these things. And Americans in general think that like the stereotypes are real in terms of defining Indigenous people, and not real in terms of a harmful tool that takes away from the power and control we have over our own image. Let's go to the next slide. This is a mix of, I guess, popular culture. David Bowie's Lightning Bolt from Ziggy Stardust over the face of this gentleman whose name is Shoshone Pete. I love the intersection of pop culture with sort of the expectation of our representation. So that is, in these ways, these old images. And how can we, at the time I was working on work like this, my question was, how can I take work that of these old images and how can I put them into a modern or a contemporary space? All of which is unexpected. It seems like a simple thing, but it really is just unexpected for people that are on the outside of our communities. But I also think these things kind of build ideas within our communities. We see these things and we want to, connect with these things. We want to build with these things. And I think that's also super awesome. Let's go to the next slide. Same thing here. The stereotype with the black and white image, which also arguably could be a stereotype. We know as Native people that these are real people and that they have living relatives today. But the juxtaposition between those two things, I think, is interesting, but I also think can be powerful. Next slide. Go to the next slide, Matt. There we go. This is called the new normal. You've seen this actually now. I mean, there's COVID-19 happening, so everybody's trying to cover their faces. Most people are trying to cover their faces. But, you know, during the Dakota Access Pipeline, when there was protests happening, people were covering their faces, which is an interesting development, you know, in these days, because there is the ability to recognize faces, and then for people to come after you after the fact to figure out who you are. And so I titled this The New Normal, because it's this idea that in order for us to protest peacefully or otherwise, that we almost have to preemptively protect ourselves. Let's go to the next slide. This piece is, this is actually a self-portrait of me when I was 6 years old. The title of this piece, and I apologize for anybody that perhaps is triggered by this, but the title of the piece is Prairie Nigger. That is the first racial slur that I heard, and that's the age I was when I heard it. And so this piece was meant to be innocuous by all intents and purposes, with this word that is clearly a racial slur and also incredibly difficult. But when you put that on an innocent face and on a young child, it suddenly changes the perspectives that are there. And I was able to show this piece in LA. I was very humbled to be able to do that, and the reaction to it was mixed. And you'll notice that there's a brass plaque on it. On that brass plaque, I put the title of the piece, which was a very awkward conversation in a Things Remembered store in the mall. But it was done for a very specific reason. And it was done because I knew that people would try to censor this piece, that they would try to censor the title. And by putting the title on the piece, that was my effort to actually take the power back on that and to make sure that it's not censored, and that people would be able to see it and see those things together, because I felt that that was an important part of the piece. Let's go to the next slide, Matt. Print work is another big part of the work that I've done. So creating posters, and you can actually see a couple of them behind me, and I'll show you guys more as we go. Let's go to the next slide. They're about these collective voices. This was done, gosh, I guess it was maybe 6 years ago, when the Mi'kmaq up in Canada were fighting fracking on their homelands. And there was this image that was created during that time of this woman holding a feather. So this was a big part of my work coming up. Let's go to the next slide. Statements about Columbus Day, which we are slowly but surely getting to a place of abolishing Columbus Day as a common holiday. But the information is still there. It's still important in reference to why these things are important. And then I'm very grateful for the efforts of all of our activists on the ground that are beginning to pull these statues down as sort of a show of force for why these things are a problem in representation for our people and for other people that are affected by colonialism. Let's go to the next slide. Existence as protest is meant to be a simple concept. My thought behind this is that our existence is a protest to the policies that have been created to eliminate our people. And so by that logic, our very existence is a protest. And that's why this was created. And this is actually me going into a more general place of statement, and not necessarily following a collective voice, but starting to think in terms of something very personal for myself as an artist. Let's go to the next slide. I created this in 2014. It was a mural that was in DC. I lived in DC for almost 17 years before moving to Colorado, which is where I am now. And 5 words to dismiss the idea that indigenous mascots are an honor to our people. And American genocide, whether you agree with that or not, most people know what that means, that somehow that is reconciled through grown men in tights tackling each other, which is obviously a ridiculous idea. And so that's what this was. When I put this up, it was part of a mural jam, and I didn't ask permission to do this. I just went ahead and showed up with it. The organizers of the event were pretty upset with me once it went up, but once the news showed up and started taking pictures and asking questions, they were okay with it because it gave them a little bit of press. I found in my career that it is much easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. That works for me. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying. So let's go to the next slide. What I wanted to show was graphically, I am able to create things, and then those graphics are able to become murals later on. And it's something that I've been able to do in creating multiple formats for something that's in public, something that's accessible, and something even that's super accessible, like a sticker. Let's go to the next slide. Same thing with this. Indigenous beauty is older than America. It isn't found in a hipster headdress. This I actually did as a mural in the next slide. That is in a hipster part of Bushwick, Brooklyn. If we can go to the next slide, Matt. And there it is. It's actually on a school. Schools in New York City kind of look like prisons. So there's a street artist that had this idea of putting a bunch of these pieces and graffiti murals and things on the outside and the inside of a school to kind of beautify it. And I was humbled for the opportunity to be able to participate in that. Let's go to the next slide. So, okay, this one's a hard one. I made this in 2013. The idea of it was to take racial slurs that exist, to cross those racial slurs out, because it's understood, even still today, it's maybe debatable, that if you are using these words, that you're a certain type of person. That's why they're crossed out. The only one that is not crossed out is the last racial slur you can say in public with no real consequence, the word redskin. When I created this, it made a lot of sense. It especially made sense in terms of the process of the conversation around the Washington football team. Now, I think it still makes sense, but also I have to note that using stereotypes and racial slurs of other marginalized groups to make your point is seemingly problematic. So I think that this has a place, but I also I absolutely point out the fact that it is using images from other marginalized groups, and that's not an appropriate place to go. But at the time, that wasn't really an argument. That wasn't really what was happening. Let's go to the next slide. The point of it was to create a visual that could exist in public that would give people a different way of looking at things. I've found artistically that creating work around certain issues can also create a different perspective on issues. And that's sort of the power of art and activism. The things that we see on the news, the things that we read in articles, I mean, we see the same talking points, we hear the same arguments, and we hear it again and again and again until we just kind of get tone deaf. And so creating something visual that challenges those perceptions and gives a different viewpoint in which to look at it helps people along. And I am proud of the fact that this sticker has helped in that conversation, and that those stickers, I mean, they're still in DC. You can see them everywhere. I don't distribute them as much anymore, actually at all anymore. But at the time and place, I think that they played an important role in sort of disruptively creating a different dialogue in public through street art. Let's go to the next slide. Creating images that exist like this one to challenge ideas. It's colonialism spray can, doctrine of discovery, romantic nationalism spray paint, harmful. And if you're able to actually and it might be on my website, but you can, even the danger section is like harmful to languages and, destroying communities and culture and, may contain manifest destiny. I'm pretty sure it says that in there too. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a mural of that same piece. Let's go to the next slide. And I did it again here in Colorado at CU Boulder, along with a sort of my first missing and murdered Indigenous women image that I've got right there. Let's go to the next slide. I just want you guys to be able to see some of the content of this work. Your luxury is our displacement. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide, Matt. There we go. And there's a mural version of it. Same thing here. This is about really representation, being able to see Indigenous faces. This is in Baltimore. Let's go to the next slide. And also this idea of challenging perception. This piece is called The Duality of Indigeneity, and it is essentially asking the question, which one of these two guys is more native? They have the same face, different hair, and different dress. And the answer is that they're both native. Let's go to the next one. The next one. This is going into a place that is interesting for me because it's creating an innocuous image, an image that anybody can connect with, but an image that's still relevant. Coming off of, the 2016 elections and Trump going into office, there was a hashtag resist. There was a lot of people that were just trying to figure out a way to sort of cope with the jarring nature of everything that's going on politically, socially, and otherwise. And so I created this image just sort of to be what it is. It says rise. It is an Indigenous woman looking up. For those of us that are native, the earrings give away her indigeneity. So that's an important part of that as well. I actually created a version with language from my tribe, and had a good friend of mine. He beaded it for me into a medallion, and it says Yotzi, which is to stand up in Paiute. Let's go to the next slide. And this is how it is manifested itself in the form of murals. I've been able to do it in Colorado and in Boulder. There's a big one in Telluride. I did another one for a school in Minnesota as well, in Duluth. And so there's been an awesome connection that people have had with this, of which I'm very humble and appreciative of. I also want to point out that the images of my oldest daughter, Sage, and she is the most important Indigenous woman in my life. Let's go to the next slide. Right now, what I'm working on is a series of images. It's a series called The Others, where I am reappropriating old comic book images from the 40s and 50s, and I'm repurposing them. I'm changing the dialogue to actually be lyrics from punk rock songs. So this song is from a band called DOA. The song is called That's Progress. It's actually about gentrification. And it just simply says, you're evicted, it's time to leave. It don't matter if your family's been here 30 years. Which is provocative. It's meant to be provocative. It's meant to be ironic and interesting. I've had an opportunity to create this as a painting, which is in the next slide, Matt. And I've also been able to create it into a mural here in Colorado, which is also the next slide. And these images are important because it's recontextualizing the way that I see something, things I grew up with, and being able to put them back out there to other people that see something that is familiar to them, but is twisted around and showing back almost as like a social mirror. There's a lot of different reactions to this, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to kind of get into performance art. And on this, Matt, if we can just get a steady movement on these, we could just move right through them. My first performance piece was The Last American Indian on Earth. essentially dressing like the stereotype and going into public and documenting people through film and photography the way they would interact with me. I have a film about this. Oh, let's stop right there. Let's go back to that previous one. It says not confident about immigration reform. It's a joke. Clearly, immigration reform has nothing to do with Indian country or Native people. Let's go to the next slide. In New York City, nobody cares. In DC, I would hold these signs sometimes. They would say various things. This one says, my spirit animal is white guilt. And I ended up on a full spread in the Washington Post with this. This thing has actually arrived back now today in the conversation about race and particularly white people. It's had an interesting shelf life. But this whole piece really was about looking at stereotype and how stereotype is sort of consumed. Everything I'm wearing is fake. Everything is store-bought or coming from a kit. The headdress was made in China. And I did that all on purpose. And it was all to just sort of exploit what people don't know and exploit the way people would react and interact. Let's go to the next slide. The next piece I did is called Redskin. And I literally sat in a room and these people talked to me in the same language that's used in the comment section of any article that's about the Washington football team. And we did it for 6 hours. All 4 of these people are my friends. I actually had to talk them all into it. And it was really hard, but it was also really interesting because when it was all said and done, it was part of an art all night exhibit. And when it was all said and done, I was like, okay, I was watching cartoons with my kids in the morning, and all of these individuals struggled with everything they said and everything they did, which is interesting and also disturbing because it means that I'm equipped to deal with a lot of that stuff and that they were not. And I find that disturbing because I think we are equipped because of the things that we deal with as Native people on a daily basis. And we really shouldn't be equipped. But it was interesting to shine a light on that language that exists in chat rooms and comments and every place else that really touches on the dismissiveness of things like the mascot debate. Let's go to the next set. Ethnographic zoo, I'm on display. Do not feed the stereotype. Indian pedigree is actually about blood quantum. I had my blood quantum tattooed on my arm live as I did a spoken word piece about blood quantum and about paper genocide. And it was incredibly heavy, but something that I felt that was really important to do. I was able to do it at the Denver Art Museum here in Colorado as part of a residency that I had there. And it's something I carry it with me everywhere I go. And it's an interesting conversation. So let's go to the next couple slides. The Indian Voice Removal Act is a piece I did for the Smithsonian, essentially talking about the removal of our voices or our voices only existing when they are validated by non-Native people saying that it's okay for us to have those opinions, which was a direct result of the way that the Smithsonian treated me for this process. So I had a cultural interpreter. His name is Jeremy, but his character name is Cornelius Smith. And for the entire weekend that we had this opening, the performance aspect of this was that anytime someone asked me a question, I would give them an answer and Jeremy would tell them what I just said, but he would always get it wrong. And we did it for the whole weekend. It confused a lot of people, but it was really just a walking metaphor for our existence being contingent upon other people being okay with it, which I think is crap. So let's go to the next one. Existence as protest is something that I did during this same exhibition where myself and a Muslim performance artist named Anita Yo Ali, she wears this covering, and she, for her piece, was standing on a pedestal at the apex of this building because it's like a big X. We were in the Arts and Industry building next to the Smithsonian Castle, and she was surrounded by 100 American flags. And we decided that we were going to intersect and stand together on this stage. And in 2016, when this happened, it was volatile because there is an experience that Muslims are having in America and with nationalism. And there's this experience that we as Native people have been having for the last 500 plus years. And so this was a really interesting and I think important piece that resulted in me being forcibly removed from the stage. The powers that be were not happy, but I got this really powerful piece to go with it. Let's go to the next slide. Supreme Law of the Land is about the Dakota Access Pipeline. Reading the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 while I am being antagonized by two white men in suits pouring oil on me. Let's go to the next slide. And the next one. The Invisible Lost Movement is the latest works that I've been doing. And it is about Indigenous representation, and it's also about me as an artist being sort of informed by my indigeneity. And what does that look like? And for this piece specifically, this is my oldest daughter, Sage, in a jingle dress, and I'm in a men's Northern traditional outfit. And we would wear a wireless headphone, and we could hear the music, and we would be in sync, and we would dance. But the viewers couldn't hear anything, and we're wearing all black. So we've eliminated the color that oftentimes goes with powwow outfits. And you could only see what you could see. I mean, I'm in the sunlight, and I still practically look like a silhouette or a shadow. Let's go to the next couple slides. You can go through these, Matt, so you can see. But it's meant to be a metaphor. We exist, but we don't exist. We're visible, but we're invisible. We're here, but we're not here. We are but a shadow. And the extension to that is Invisible Eulogy. So this is called the Invisible Series. There's a number of different pieces. This one for me was about enveloping spaces and was about taking up those spaces, not just with my presence, but also with noise and with spoken word. So I would oftentimes walk through and hit a drum. I would sing a song, and I would stand on a pedestal like I am here and do spoken word. Let's go through these, Matt. And there's with the drum. And with this invisible piece, we did this piece. My daughter and I did another piece, Invisible, where she wore red with the red handprint on her face, and she did spoken word that she wrote. She's 13 when she did this, and she read for the next 15 minutes, I believe, the names of women that are have been missing and or murdered, as well as girls, as well as Two-Spirit. I was in the space simply as a heartbeat, hitting the drum as a heartbeat while she stood on this plinth and made her statements. It was incredibly moving. It was also incredibly powerful to watch a 13-year-old assert herself and become a voice and an activist and an artist. It's pretty incredible. Do we have anything after this, Matt? Is there anything next?
All right. So I don't believe so, but thank you so much, Greg. We appreciate that. That was so great to be able to hear a little bit about your work, because I know art really can be a form of activism, and it was great to see how you used a variety of different elements to be able to make that come to life for folks. And I really wanted to touch on one bit that I'd like to ask you about, particularly
Sure.
about the invisible piece too. So I know that has a lot of correlations with census and native vote. Those are things that, you know, as Indian country in 2010, we were undercounted by about 4.9% in the census. And the census is responsible for a lot of the federal funding resources that go into all communities, but tribal communities as well. And if we aren't properly counted, then, you know, that could greatly affect what our communities look like for today and potentially moving forward for the next 10 years. And as far as voting as well, that's another thing. I know we've gotten in the last election cycle, we've really had a couple of Native candidates that have done very, very well and represented Indian country. And so our voices are slowly gathering a little bit more and more power as we move along, but largely it's important that we have those representatives in office, whether it's tribal, obviously, but local, state, and even national elections, so that we are not invisible and that our voices are heard, and all of the policies and issues that matter to our tribal communities are able to have a platform. And so can you talk a little bit about how you feel about kind of the invisibility and how we can use art to become visible and be aware, spread our messages really about what's important to us, to the greater public.
Yeah, I mean, right now is an incredible time. I mean, the whole reason why the mascot debate became such a important and pivotal moment is because of social media. And so there are things associated with social media that can tie in, which makes it a lot easier and a lot more exciting. But it's also creating or leveling the playing field. It makes it more accessible, that you can have an opinion, you can put it out there, and that other people that share that opinion can share it through social media. And likewise with art. I mean, the truth is that every Native person that I've met has an opinion and a strong opinion. And if you give them enough of a platform, they'll share their opinion with you. And so these are things that help us get that information out, get voices out, and make sure those voices are heard. Whether that is painting or murals or performance art or dance or music or film or books, there's so many different ways that we can express ourselves. And right now, with Black Lives Matter happening, which of course ties us into that as well, because Black lives and Indigenous lives have been intertwined since the inception of this experiment called America. And we are in a position to build each other up. So you'll notice it went from Black lives to now talking about colonialism, to then pulling down statues of Confederate generals and things, to pulling down statues of Christopher Columbus. And you can see where those things are all intertwined. And that happens because we all have a voice. And while right now I believe Black voices are the most important voices because we're in triage, that's what's happening with Black voices. But there's room for us, and we are having our say, and we are able to participate as we support our Black brothers and sisters, that we can also have a moment to really help each other out in these times. And you can see it. You can see people that are standing, Indigenous voices for Black Lives Matter. And it's an incredible time, because the civil rights movement was incredibly difficult because it was about whether or not the news gave you any credit. How many people have you ever met that even heard about the occupation of Alcatraz, or the occupation of the Department of the Interior? And if you look, there's actually pictures of Indians on the roof of government buildings in Washington, D.C. It's incredible. But that stuff's it was not accessible then. It's all accessible now. We can see everything, which means that our voices are stronger. So our votes need to count. Our censuses need to count, because we can make those things known publicly, and with simply filling out those forms and getting out the vote.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think this is a great time to be able to create something that's really memorable, and something that resonates with people and is true to us as Native peoples in Indian country. And so I'm really excited to kind of get started. I have my whole setup here. I've got all kinds of things, paper. I have actually a lot of paint. I have pencils and pens, markers, everything we need. So let's go ahead and invite some of our panelists up for this evening and create some art. So first off, we have Charlotte Little, who is the Pueblo Census Coordinator out of New Mexico. We'll also have Brittany Habert, who is the Wilma Mankiller Policy Fellow here at NCAI. And our special guest also this evening is Austin Weakey, who is the Political Director for Native American Voters Alliance Education Project, who is also joining us from New Mexico. So welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here. Hello.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I wanted to start off really quickly and have everyone kind of give a brief introduction. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, if you have any artistic background or talent skills, and also what you brought for your snack this evening. Let's start with Brittany quickly.
Hi, my name is Brittany Habert. I am a citizen of the Caddo Nation of Oklahoma. Like Yana said, I am the NCAI Wilma Mankiller Policy Fellow, where one of my policy portfolios is census. Previously, I participated in the Native American Political Leadership Program, where I interned for Congresswoman Deb Haaland of New Mexico. Regarding artistic experience, both of my grandmas are artists, but we'll see how I do today. My snack is pretzels with some cheese.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brittany. And that sounds delicious, by the way, but I'm with you. We'll see how this art thing goes tonight, this evening over here too. Let's toss it over to Charlotte. Charlotte, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlotte Little. I come from the pueblos of San Felipe and Taos here in New Mexico. I am having cherries tonight. We had dinner earlier, so it was, this is a great. As arts go, I think it skipped a generation. Because I don't have much. I do other things, and but I surely appreciate art, and I think maybe that's my contribution. So we'll see what I do tonight. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I just wanted to point out as well that you are also working in census outreach. Is that right?
That is correct. I am the Pueblo Census Coordinator. We're working with a coalition of all of the pueblos and tribes in New Mexico, the 19 pueblos, the Mescalero and Apache nations, as well as the Navajo Nation. So, and our urban communities as well. We have an urban coordinator, and we've got a really awesome team, and I'll tell you about it in a bit.
Wonderful. That is amazing. Thank you so much. And also, let's jump over to Austin. Austin, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about you?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Wiaki. I'm a coach at Zuni in Navajo. I work for a group called Native Education Project and another group called NM Native Vote, and then our PAC, which is Native American Advocacy Fund. But we do a lot of work here doing everything from, we work with Charlotte in getting the census and making sure that we're turning out the vote and making sure that people know who they're voting for. So we do a lot of electoral work, especially in big election years, midterms and generals and all that. So we do a lot of work in making sure that we're trying to get everyone registered and eliminate some of the barriers to get people to vote. As far as art is concerned, I'm not an artist, but I come from a somewhat artful family, I guess. Everyone tries their best. And as for a snack, I don't really have one. I just have water here, so.
You can't beat good old H2O, so that's great. Thank you so much, Austin. We're so glad to have each and every one of you here with us. And so we'll give the floor back to Greg and lead us in where you think we should go with tonight's art activity.
Well, I guess let's talk about tools for just a minute, because the tools that you have should be markers and paint and canvas. And do you guys have a piece of cardboard by chance, or just canvas?
I believe I have canvas and some construction paper here. I'm not sure about all the others, but yeah.
So we have a couple of different things that we can use. I mean, all of this really is about accessibility. And so I have everything here from a piece of wood to a piece of cardboard, a nice big piece of cardboard, to even a cheap canvas. I think this is actually from college, some crappy canvas, but you can just get, you can go to Walmart, you can pick up a whole pack of these. But really anything works, and the accessibility of these things are important. So I think what I want to do is let's start with words. Now I have this poster, and it says "Existence is Protest." And one of the reasons why I want to show you guys this is because the words are easy. I mean, we know what this means. We know what this is. So if you want to pick something, you can. If you want to copy something, you can. But what we're just going to do just to get this thing started is we're going to take maybe a piece of construction paper or a piece of cardboard or the canvas, if you'd like to do that. And we're just going to use a marker. Now, the markers that you have, there is what like what do you call it? Sharpies that have like a point on the end of them. That works. You can use that if you want to use that. If you have a chisel point, like here's a nice chisel point. Sorry, I'm wearing a black shirt. You can't see. You can actually create letters with this because the sharp edge has already been created. When I make signs and things, they tend to be kind of blocky letters because I know how to do that and that's accessible. Sharpies work just fine. I have a nice collection of what I would call graffiti markers that use ink that is really hard to paint over. I'm not advocating, graffiti, but there's some really cool stuff out there that you can create with. So I think for this one, I'm going to put down Black Lives Matter on Indigenous lands. How about that? So that it's something that's relevant. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this specifically is because with all the protests and things going on, it's sometimes really difficult to, like you have a job, you can't participate, you want to participate, you have a sense of solidarity. Creating a sign could be something you put in your office, you can put in your window. If you do get to go to a protest, you can hold that thing up. You can create these things. And I got to tell you, as an artist, and I don't think you have to be artistic to do this, it drives me crazy when I see bad penmanship on a piece of cardboard. And because really it's not that difficult to do. So let's see if I can get this done right.
No pressure for anyone here, by the way.
No,
not great penmanship.
And they can also what I'm talking about is somebody that like literally is chicken scratch. But we can take these edges here and we can create a nice solid straight line that's on the board.
So, let's see. Actually, I think I'm going to take some paper here and try to sketch something out. I use the canvas, so I think I might just give that a try.
All I'm doing is I'm using that edge to create a line that's nice and solid.
Right.
I think you guys have chisel markers, right? So you got a nice flat edge there?
We sure do.
My biggest fear when I do this is that I'm going to spell something wrong. I get in the moment and I don't know what I'm doing. And sometimes when you do letters like this, it can also be helpful in trying to make sure that they're straight. Because I've already created a baseline here. So I can kind of create another baseline based on that. I'm just following these lines. And now, obviously, I've just created something that's not going to be as big as the canvas that I've created. That's okay too. I can cut this section off if I want. I could also put something on this section right here.
Now, see, I'm already on my second piece of paper because I already changed my mind where I want to go with
okay.
this. I don't know about anybody else, but
I'm coming to you from my garage today.
that works.
Yeah. Really, you could do this anywhere. It's okay.
So I'm curious for the group as well. Has anybody else created any kind of like signage or things that you've used in any of your outreach campaigns? Because personally, I'm thinking this is going to be a really great way to, particularly now as we're kind of all shut indoors right now. I know outreach has been an issue for census, and now as we're starting kind of getting folks aware of native vote, this is something that we can really create meaningful signage to be able to use in social media as well. So helping to push out the message somehow, putting yard signs out, like Greg mentioned earlier, just really being able to elevate kind of our messages as far as census and voting. So has anyone thought of doing any creative ways of getting outreach out into the community or messaging out into the community?
I will go. We have a talented media and communications team headed up by Kim Baca. You can see our messages. We've created flyers, handouts, postcards, social media tags, a lot of materials. And to see them, you can go to nmnativecensus.org. Again, that's nmnativecensus.org. On our webpage, you'll find information about the census and why it's important in Indian country. But under the Cool Resources tab that you see in a dark turquoise ribbon at the top, if you click on that, that will take you to resources that we've developed for tribes and tribal organizations. And we've been able to share this across the country as in forums like this. So some of the ones we're most proud of are, you'll find under the NM Native Census Coalition drop-down menu. One of our most recent efforts has been to help to get designs made for swag, bandanas, posters, stickers, t-shirts. And when you click on there, you're going to find this incredible t-shirt that was designed by Ricardo Cate, one well-known cartoonists here in New Mexico, whose cartoons appear in the Santa Fe New Mexican. He is awesome. And so we've been able to use, he was gracious enough to lend us his design for the census, and I think you'll really enjoy that. We had created flyers about letting people know that the census was coming soon, because as you know, with the pandemic, it delayed of the operations for update leave, which affected most of the pueblos in New Mexico. And so we didn't want to go dark. So we developed some flyers to let people know, hey, you haven't missed it. It's coming, honest.
Yeah.
Instructions on when you do get it, what is it? Why is it important? Why do you need to, why is completing the census important? So we also had logos developed, pledge cards. It was pretty cool. We had planned to have, taking off of March Madness, we had a basketball pledge card that was developed. We had Valentine's Day, and you'll see a number of other materials in there, including a sample tribal leader op-ed piece. So we've really worked to keep that current and to help the CCCs get the word out, because they're the ones that are in the communities doing the heavy lifting. So we want to help make their work as easy and smooth as possible.
Well, that's fantastic work, Charlotte. I'm really glad to hear that, because I personally have been to your website and I can attest you all do some really, really great work in the community. And I understand New Mexico has had a really difficult time with the pandemic and making sure that tribal communities are counted. And so we really, on our side from NCAI, we're really happy that you all are doing such great work in the communities and making sure folks are still aware that the census is still ongoing. Things are happening. They still count, matter. We can make them visible. And the count doesn't end, at least until October 31st. So folks have some time to still respond. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that too. I'm really glad that we got to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing and your website as well. I definitely encourage folks to go and visit that.
And please feel free. If you need to reach out to us, there's contact information available. So we're happy to help.
Awesome. How's everybody doing on their posters so far? I'll give you a little sneak peek of mine so far.
Oh, nice. Yeah, everybody's working.
I'm keeping it simple now.
I have a tendency to just like jump right in. But you know, I have an excuse. I do this for a living, and so I just jump in and do it. But you know, the accessibility of a statement is really easy. Everybody has access to that. I mean, heck, if you didn't even want to, you know, draw something, you could do it on your computer and print it out. There's a lot of possibilities there.
And what are some of the resources, Greg? I know you had mentioned in a couple of conversations that there might be resources that folks could go to online to actually print off different artwork and things that might be helpful for some of their campaigns out in the field.
Yeah, so there is an organization that I've worked with in the past. It's called Amplifier Foundation, and it's amplifier.org. And one of the things that they do is they take art and or artists, and they give artists an opportunity, they work with artists to create work that is important and valid to different social issues and political issues. So the last big thing that they had was specifically about COVID-19. So a lot of people were making pieces that were thanking the front runners, the nurses and the doctors that were helping things along, and even all the way down to things that are happening now, like looking at defunding police forces and everything else that's happening. So they're all really just important conversations. I made one for COVID-19, and it was very specifically about COVID, but it was about our elders. The piece very specifically says protect our elders. I have two versions of it, and if you go to amplifier.org, you can download it, and you can copy off your own version. And in copying off your own version, that gives you an opportunity to really do whatever you want with it. As part of this art and activism is also sometimes creating something that you can just give to other people. Here is, let's see if I can make that work. Yeah, you can see it. That's the image right there that I created. It says protect our elders. So these things are meant to, like from our perspective as Indigenous people, and the contribution we have to make is, when the powers that be are saying that the elders are expendable for our economy. As Native people, we know that this is simply not true and is an unacceptable way of looking at things, and that we have to do everything we can to protect our elders, because our elders are our story keepers. They are our language protectors. They are our tradition carriers. I mean, these are, our libraries, if you will, the people that help us continue on our traditional and our Indian way. So those, there's two versions of it. That's the second version of it. Let's see if I can get it there. There we go. And so you can go on amplifier.org and you can download that, or you can download any other things that, mean something to you. There's some artwork there by Shepard Fairey, who is Obey. He's the guy who did the Obama Ho poster. There is also other artists on there that are friends of mine, like Thomas Wimbley did one that says it's of one of those first responder workers. It's a nurse with a mask on her face. It just says thank you, but he has it in like every language. So thank you and gracias and grazie and everything else. And that resource works, because sometimes we don't have time. Sometimes we have an opinion and an artist can express that opinion for us, so we can access that information and then carry that around with us. And even, supporting artists is also helpful in not only expressing yourself, but also supporting artists financially or otherwise.
Right. Wonderful. That's awesome. Yeah, those are great resources. And I encourage folks to definitely check out your resources and options online to be able to kind of get creative, really. That's all what we're here for tonight, but to really be able to be inspired by some of the different artwork that's out there, and being able to, find the way that works for you that really helps convey the messages that you want to get across. So I want to check in. I'm really curious. Both Austin and Brittany look very engrossed in their designs here. Let's go to Brittany. You turned around first. So Brittany, what do you have over there?
Hi, I don't think you can see it from that far, so I'll just like bring it closer of the shadow. So it says I voted, currently drawing like a female like with looking out into the distance, just to show that like there's a power in voting.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I think that's really great. That's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, since we have you. So why is it that you are so engaged in sort of civic engagement work, and why do you feel like this type of work is important?
I think it's so important because if we're not counted, you can see the way it negatively impacts Indian country and our communities. I work with items like appropriations, which is funding being allocated by the federal government to those Native communities. And so when there's something like an undercount in the census, then those groups aren't getting the funding that could be going towards housing or water, broadband, all those different items that are really important to sustain our communities and make sure that we have access to everything we need.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Yeah, and that's the one really great thing too, kind of going back to the voting, since that's what your art is about. You really got to work and see firsthand what the power of the Native vote can actually do, and especially with Native candidates running for Congress and being elected. And so what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was really fantastic being one of the first interns for Congresswoman Deb Haaland. Seeing a Native American woman in Congress, it's definitely a highlight of my life. It's great to see representation in all forms of government, both in our tribal councils as well as when it comes to Congress or state level. So I think it's really important that not only are we getting out to vote, but that if you are considering running for office, no matter what political party or what background you have, that is something that you feel comfortable thinking about and maybe researching into.
Yeah, that's definitely a really great point. And yeah, I think it's important that we want to remind folks too. I know with NCAI, our Native Vote campaign, we are completely, we actually don't really follow any particular party. And so what we find important is that Native peoples out across Indian country can actually just get informed about the issues that matter to them and their communities directly. And so the important part is that your voice is heard and that you participate in the system so that you can exercise your voice and be able to represent your communities well, and to be able to help really start the change that you want to see in your neighborhoods, communities, state, and eventually in the country as well. So thank you, Brittany, for sharing kind of your experience there. That's really great. Austin, how's it going over there with you? It's kind of hard to see. I don't know. What do you have going on over there?
So let's see. That's what I have right now. Awesome. But my arm's getting tired. So
I understand.
I'm glad that you called on me because my arm's getting tired. No, I'm actually kind of happy that you had asked that last question too about why it's important that people vote, because that's like our bread and butter for registration.
Yeah, well, please definitely expand.
Yeah. So for us, that's our number one thing when we go talk to young people, is like trying to get them to register to vote. And like we get varying results on that. Sometimes we get a whole class of people who refuse to talk to us and just think that we're boring or insiders to the nth degree. A little annoying because I was in high school and probably that person as well. But we talk about it as like a route to power. We know that people are not blind to the issues that they confront every day, but the paths to getting a lot of those issues fixed and resolved and starting to start down the process of how do we get something that feels more like justice is something that we do understand. And trying to communicate that we have that power just by virtue of filling out the census, going out to vote, registering to vote, and knowing who the candidates are really is an easy way to start to get that done. It's not everything, but it is one of the major tools that we have to start to see the change that we really want to see in our community. And here in New Mexico, I'm proud to say that we do a pretty good job of it. We don't always do a good job, but from time to time we get our stuff right. And like one of the really big promotion points for us has been that with Congressional District 2 in 2018, winning that was like a really big deal for us. So,
Right.
and that was all Native vote. So we think like 3,000 absentee ballots came in. When we look at absentee ballots from our district, we've got probably just a little over 3,000 that voted in support of our candidate. So we really can make a change in a lot of these districts. We can be the swing that really changes it from one candidate to another if we all get together and learn who our candidates are and make sure that we're holding them accountable. Because when we go out and vote, we have the ability to hold people accountable, to have that open door in Congress, to not just get lip service. When we all vote together and we decide that we've made a decision and make sure that we're voting for the right people, we can actually exercise a good deal of power when it comes to Washington and especially our state legislatures.
Yeah, that is such a great point, and that's so very true. Now, what kind of resources would you recommend to folks out in New Mexico or across the country? Or have you found anything that has been really helpful to you in sharing with the masses?
I mean, there's nothing like good old knocking on doors. We can't do that right now, but there's nothing else like it. Nothing else works that well. Nothing else is better than just going out and talking to people. That's the number one tool at our disposal. But there's lots of cool stuff that we can try to do now and are trying to figure out. And, hopefully, with the introduction of broadband and better infrastructure in tribal communities, maybe we can really start to see advancements like the same way that we have in Albuquerque and Santa Fe and Las Cruces, where people are reachable in a new way. But I still kind of hold true to the idea that nothing matches talking to somebody face to face.
I agree. That's very true. And with the pandemic and the situation that we're all in now, it's made things a little bit difficult. And so we have all had to be creative in our outreach efforts. And so I think one of the great resources that I would recommend too is actually on our census campaign. So IndianCountryCounts.org is one of NCAI's initiatives for census outreach for 2020. And we do have a virtual canvassing document, and it's part of our larger toolkit, but you can also take a look at our virtual canvassing kind of how-to guide. And so that really outlines how folks can utilize being able to reach out into their communities and kind of gives you an idea of how you can do a sort of a phone banking exercise or even doing that online if those are things that are accessible to your communities. But at least it gives you an idea of kind of where to start and how to get started and what that looks like. So I would encourage folks too to adapt that to even your native vote efforts as well. And that's something that, we can really look at and refine as we move forward, but it's a great place to start. So. All right. How is everyone doing? Charlotte, how's yours coming along? Here's mine.
Okay, so sometimes I need a little help getting started. So going off of Greg's words, I thought I would include New Mexico in our sun symbol from the Pueblo of Zia. And I'm having trouble with fists, but I figure I could add those in later. And maybe different colors, black, brown.
Yeah, that's
brown.
awesome.
So I
love
thought
it.
I would give that a try. Luckily,
Yes,
That was
and
great.
oh, go ahead.
oh
I
no,
have to
I was
commend
just
you on
gonna,
your penmanship too.
I have done a lot of poster work in my turns working with Austin on getting out the vote in Pueblos. You must be able to write big and legibly and spell and correctly. Yeah, well, one of the things that I know of, you were speaking to earlier about people, I mean, why it's important to vote. It's important to elect the people who are going to be supportive of Indigenous peoples and our rights. The health disparities that have been highlighted during this pandemic, the access to housing, healthcare, food, water, basic, what we would, many people would consider basic items that are necessary to live. Highlighted for me was, and now in working with the census, is that what we're seeing now, we've all known that our systems are the programs and services that Native people depend on, the Indian Health Service, Bureau of Indian Education, the housing programs, and Head Start, and so on and so on. Those have been underfunded chronically. We hear that all the time, that they're chronically underfunded. A lot of it is attributed to Congress. But I will say, by those that are in Congress, but I will say, though, that I believe in addition to that, that what we're seeing now is a result of the chronic undercounts that have been taking place every 10 years. So here I am, here we all are. Some of us have children, some of us have grandchildren, and where we were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago is a direct result of the numbers that were counted. And so the positive thing that I see from the census that I'm hearing from people in our communities is they're excited about getting their chance to respond to the census. We've been waiting for it. We've seen the commercials that the rest of the country has seen, but we hadn't had an opportunity to respond because we didn't have our forms. So those are being delivered this month. They started as some of the tribal communities have opened up. Others are not open yet, but they will become later. And the good news is that we're all seeing the importance of getting our numbers counted. We want to improve access to healthcare, and this is one way we can do it. So I was really happy to hear that our people in our communities, Native people in communities within New Mexico, the urban communities across the state, are all looking forward to this as well. We have some negatives as well, but we're working on those individuals and trying to persuade them to fill it out.
Right, right. And I think that's a great point as well. Just, as everyone looks to recover moving forward, the census data can really be something that does inform those funding formulas, to be able to help communities as they rebuild and imagine what their communities look like as we move forward in the next, certainly 10 years, but after this unprecedented 2020 that we've had so far. And so it's really important that folks realize too, this is something that's really simple. It's easy. It doesn't take very much time. And, you really can make a difference for not just your family, but, the community and families around you as well. And so it's important that we really participate and encourage everyone to fill out those forms. Greg, I saw that you were over there adding some more magic to your palette there. So what's going on in your canvas?
Well, I'm wheat pasting. So, it's interesting because I'll use wheat pasting for street art, but I also use it in the studio. And so it is just really taking, and again, what we're doing is just trying to use things that we can find at home and to create something. And I really, really want to point out the fact that a big part of the reason why we're doing this, and the big reason why art is such an effective tool, even for people that maybe claim that they're not very artistic. I have questions for Brittany and Charlotte in particular, because your stuff looks good, looks really good. And your wording, Austin, sacred, is like perfect. It's perfect. But creativity is not inherent. Creativity is a muscle. And in order to flex that muscle, you have to exercise that muscle. And so that's a lot of where this comes from. And whether or not it's good or not, that's honestly just subjective. But in our communities, or at least in the communities that I belong to and the communities I'm familiar with, our artists are medicine people. Art is medicine, because we are creating something like the creator created something, and that helps us to be closer to the creator and allows us to be able to feel a certain way when we do it. And that's why it ends up being such an important piece. So one of the things that I did is I have these big printouts. So I took one of the big printouts, and
Oh, wow.
I'm not necessarily subscribing to this printout, but the printout I wanted to show you guys so you could see how that works. All that I used is glue. You can use Elmer's glue. I use wallpaper adhesive that I buy in big gallon jugs from the hardware store. And you apply it to the surface, then you put the paper on the surface, and then you apply it over the paper onto the surface, so you're getting it on both sides. I usually use just a foam brush. These are super cheap. You can throw them away when you're done. If I put my glue into a plastic container, I can actually pull it out when it dries, so it doesn't actually affect my plastic container. Paint can be used in anything that we've got here. I think you guys probably have a red paint and a black paint. I use these fancy golden tubes of paint. I also have these big carafes of paint. I mean, this is all part of my work. I mean, look at this. This is ridiculous. It's like hundreds of dollars of paintbrushes. So, but the point is that we all have a voice, and that we can access these things in the easiest ways. This piece is a few years old, but all that I've done is I've taken a photograph and I've pasted it onto the surface on this wood piece, and given it a little bit of ink and a little bit of paint, and I can create something that's simple but accessible.
It's amazing.
And it's fun to do. I sold a bunch of these. These are just ones I didn't sell. I made these in 2017. All this is paint, and then this is the black part is paint, and then the figure is a photograph that's just simply pasted onto the space. And at the time I was doing these, I was really doing them because I was trying to practice with composition and color and like playing on those different things. So there's a lot of ways to do this, and a lot of things that are really accessible, and it's fun. Just get your hands a little dirty. I have gloves because I'm a prima donna, but getting your hands dirty is okay too.
I agree. Yeah, I am definitely trying here. The most creative I got so far was just adding a little bit of this turquoise paint up here in the corner. So I'm working my way up to something as nice and beautiful as what you have over there too. And granted, it is easy, but I definitely want to give that a try because those look super cool. I would love to try those sometime.
All you have to do is just engage it. I mean, even spray paint. I have a lot of spray paint. I have a ridiculous amount of spray paint, but spray paint now, like if you buy spray paint from Walmart and it's like a Krylon or something, it's an enamel based spray paint. It smells really bad and it takes forever to dry. But the world of art and graffiti has created acrylic in a spray can. So it dries quickly, it's vibrant. And so you can go to any art store and you can find spray paint that will do that. Make sure you don't do it in your house because it smells and then you might pass out. So do it in a place where there's a lot of room and you've got some good airflow. But these things are all accessible. Anybody could do them. You just have to engage the process. That's all you have to do.
I agree. That's the first step to any of this, is really just getting started and giving it a try. Why not, you know?
Yep.
I appreciate that encouragement. I would have never thought I could do something like this. And as I got started going, it's like, hey, I was trying to figure out how to do fists, but now I know I could add it to become a collage and more colorful. So thanks.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with using someone else's art to express yourself in some way. I mean, it's going to be for your home, or you're going to use it somewhere. I mean, you're not hurting anybody by doing that. And in fact, I was planning on taking the Rise image behind me over here and making it for a downloadable piece on my website. So if I do that, I'll be sure and let NCAI know, and you guys can throw it out there so folks can just download at your leisure. But I think that sharing art is about making sure that art is accessible, and it absolutely is accessible.
Definitely. That is so fantastic. This has been great so far. I really appreciate all of those tips and all of you guys sharing your wonderful artwork and allowing me to try. But yeah, so we're coming up pretty close to the end of our time together, but I wanted to go around the floor once again and give you all the opportunity for any closing words. So it's about this evening's paint and snack night, or where folks can find you, or just any of your encouragement or thoughts about being able to participate in the 2020 census or getting out the native vote for this election cycle. So we'll go in the same order, I guess, with Brittany. Do you have anything that you'd like to close out with?
Yeah, I thought this was a lot of fun. I don't know if you can see it up there. I'm just gonna move this closer. So it's like, I voted. When you mentioned the toolkit, I actually read the toolkit and I thought it was really great, and it had a lot of sample material in there, sample scripts that I think a lot of people should look at if you need that for any training or if you want to do anything with voting. Also, there are so many different ways to be civically engaged. This is kind of a joke for most of my friends, but I put that you should complete your census 2020 in a dating profile, and I've actually gotten a lot of people that they're doing the census, and that I actually reminded them that was even a thing. So there's ways in these new days and age just to get that information out there, even if it's comical like that.
I love it. That is amazing. And see, that's what we're talking about, thinking outside of the box and being creative with how you do your outreach. That's fantastic. And anything that gets people to bring really the census and these different things to their awareness, because I know there's a lot going on in the world. And so that's a great way to do it. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And your artwork was amazing. So I want to see that in the office when we all get back together soon. And so, Charlotte, do you have any closing words? Is there anything you would like to share with the audience, or how they can get in touch with your organization?
Yes, I remind everybody. Yes, I want to remind everybody about our website. You can access the materials at nmnative.org. And we have in there as well videos that have been completed most recently. Our language videos discussing the census in different languages. I am aware that I know of, we have it in Tiwa, up in the northern part of the state. We have it in the Karis language. We've got it in Zuni and Navajo. And today, the videographer was out at the Kikri Apache community of Dulce to record that video. So we're really excited. And again, you'll find those videos, and they might give somebody an idea about the script is already written, so use it. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And if it works for you, tweak it in however it may work best for you. So From this group, all I can say, I know I'm talking to the choir, if you will, preaching to the choir, but it's so easy to complete the census, so easy. And you can do it by online, by phone, or mailing it in. So if you haven't done it, get to it. It's really easy, and encourage everybody else around you. It's amazing how we are actually looked as influencers. I can get people to respond, just as Brittany was saying earlier. Mentioned that. So I'd encourage us all to keep that message out there, and whatever we can do to help, you'll find our contact information on the website. So look forward to talking with you all, and I wish you all great success in getting out the vote. I will be out there as well. So thanks.
Yes. We appreciate you. And I think that's a great point. And another great thing too about the census this year is that there is space to actually write in the full names of your tribal nations. And so I'm actually a citizen of the Quapaw Nation, but I also descend from Cherokee Nation and the Yuchi peoples of Oklahoma. And so that was really exciting for me to be able to represent all three of my tribal nations on the census form when I filled it out this year. So that's really an exciting point about the census. We can definitely represent our tribal nations to the fullest. And so that's a really great opportunity to take advantage of that. And again, going back to being visible. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Charlotte. We appreciate it. Go check out their website. Fantastic. And Austin, any last words for you? Where can we find you and some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or on our websites. Just look up NM Native Vote and Native Education Project. That's us. And you can find anything about us there. And I just want to add that right now we've had there's been some really interesting discussions about systemic racism and oppression and all of the dispositions that we're facing all the time. And a lot of the times it can seem like a lot, but all of this is important. There's a reason why we're involved in Get Out the Vote, in educating voters and the census and getting people registered. And it's because it's all part of the system, right? So if we want to help start to combat systemic oppression, we also have to be systemically engaged. So it's important to fill out your census. It's important to register to vote. It's important to know who you're voting for. And it's important just to show up. Like sometimes all we need is an extra push of 10 people to show up at a door, and we can make a huge change that we wouldn't have been able to see on our own. So being engaged is not everything, but it is one of the big steps to help us and move forward a progress and start to see more justice in our communities. And it really helps from everything from health and education to infrastructure. If there's a pothole in your road, that comes down to who you elect for city council. So all of this is important, and there's a reason why we're all engaged and why we're doing all of this, because every single part of it is important.
Wonderful. That's so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you make a great point. Every election is important, and especially the local elections. It's really important for folks to keep in mind that a lot of those local elections determine the things that happen in your everyday life. And so it's really important that you get involved in that process and educate yourself on the issues and the platforms and the candidates out there in your communities, and make sure you go out there and exercise your voice. And if you're in New Mexico, give Charlotte and Austin a ring, because they can definitely point you in the right direction if you want to get involved. And so lastly, but not least, Greg, thank you so much for kind of sharing all of your wonderful artwork with us and teaching us a little bit about how we can do signage a little bit better and make an impact in our communities and in our civic engagement initiatives. So do you have any final words for our audience or our group here this evening?
I'm grateful to each of you and for the work that you do, the work that you're doing for Indian country. It's just so important. Honestly, the only thing that I wanted to relay here is that honestly, we can do anything. We can do anything. And that at no point in my career have I ever asked permission. I just did it. and just made it happen. And that means that the accessibility of those things are significant. And in the same way that we can go out and we can enact change through voting and through census, that we can also use what we have on our hands. I've used my body, I've used paintbrushes, I've used paste, I've used markers, I've used my voice, and every single one of us has access to all of those things. So go forth and make change.
I love that. That's got to be a poster somewhere. So one of us here needs to do that. Probably not me, somebody who has a little more skill, but go forth and make change. I think that's the
I'll get started on that.
Yes, I love it, Charlotte. That would be great. So yes, thank you everyone again for joining us this evening. I just want to give everyone at home watching just a final couple of pieces. So I know I mentioned at the top of the hour that we have our Indian Country Counts census campaign, and that's indiancountrycounts.org. And when you go there, you can actually find some pretty cool things. You can take a pledge, which basically just means that you'll be an advocate for the census in your tribal communities, and that you'll be able to go out and encourage folks in your family, in your communities, to just make sure that they're counted in the census, because it does matter. And so you can also get some cool things like the sticker here. We have hand fans, little things that you can share in your community. We also have our Indian Country Counts toolkit. This is an older version, but we do have an updated, brand new June 2020 edition. And as well, if you take the pledge, I know I sound like a salesperson, but this is really, really cool, and it's totally free. So if you take the pledge at indiancountrycounts.org, you can get a cool customized census t-shirt here. This is mine. I'm Quapaw and I count. And in the back here, Indian Country Counts and Census 2020. So you can get a free t-shirt customized with your own tribal nation there. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that. For Native Vote, we just launched our campaign for 2020 a couple of weeks back with our live stream Native Vote rally featuring our NCAI president, Fawn Sharp. And so we're really excited. We're just kicking off our Native Vote initiative. And tomorrow, I believe, we'll be launching our mini grants process so that we can help support tribal organizations and tribal nations across the country with their Native Vote efforts. And so we'll encourage everyone out there to apply for that. Please apply. It will be available on our website starting tomorrow, which is June 19th. So definitely check that out and see how we can support you in your Native Vote efforts. And finally, I just want to say that if any of you all watching at home have any questions, please feel free to utilize any of the resources you have here. You can find Greg on his website as well. Visit ncai.org for general information, some upcoming events, but nativevote.org for voting and indiancountrycounts.org for our census work. But once again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. This is just going to be the start. I don't know about you all, but this is the first of many, I think, signs that I'll be doing this upcoming week. I've got plenty of paint and supplies, so I am ready. Thank you so much, Greg, for, again, equipping us with all of the right tools and information to be able to do this from home. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.